and other issues as well, corruption and national security. We're really happy to have in studio with us Kelvin Mogeni from the International Commission of Jurists. Thank you, Kelvin, for making time. In so many ways, this may have been missed, but it was a pivotal week in terms of ethnicity and tribalism, and possibly a chance for this country to shift its perspective towards this. What do you think people should take away from the incident that occurred this week between former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka and the young journalist Mureithi?
You heard one of the persons who have called in stating that he was speaking his mind. But you see, what we fail to understand is that persons in high office with large following, they have to be very careful with what they speak, because that's what ignites tensions across the board. It's not limited just to an individual making an opinion known. Yeah, this is a situation that calls for tolerance. And somebody has to realize that, you know, in a country diversified as it is in Kenya, so many tribes, so many tensions relating to tribal issues, so many issues resulting from either the electrified elections coming out of a polarized nation. We have to be very careful what you state.
What is the implication of this young journalist being dismissed in that fashion? And some people who say, look, it's justified. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. And there are others who say, hold on a minute, isn't this discrimination? What is it? What was the actual situation from a legal perspective?
In the first place, look at Kelvin Mogeni. He was there representing his media house. Will he be able to go back and say, look, I did what I was supposed to do for my media house? Because he was dismissed. He could not represent his media house. Is that how we're going to represent politicians tomorrow? That you see, if I'm coming from a certain tribe, I cannot be able to state out my mind and ask questions on behalf of who I'm representing. It's really sad, because for Mureithi as an individual, he was discriminated upon. But then look at Kalonzo with several of the CORD leadership. You know, behind him, we had Anyang' Nyong'o, there was Wetangula, Babu Namwamba, and very many others. As soon as he made that utterance, as bad as it was, they all clapped.
Is it a lack of awareness on the part of the weight of what was actually happening, or was it a bit of embarrassment, do you think?
Kalonzo Musyoka is a lawyer of very many years. He's been a vice president and all that. Not that he's not aware of these things. It's only maybe because of this animosity that comes out of losing an election. And somebody thinks, you know, I can get away with these things. But you see, the reality of the point is that it is clearly spelled out in the law. Utterances that can incite tribal hatred based on either religion, ethnicity, you know, the tribal affiliation, should be completely ignored. Of course, you can state that the Kibunja Commission, for example,
the National Cohesion and Integration Commission,
is not there. But that's not the reason why one should take up and start uttering these things.
And so we'll come to the Kibunja Commission, the NCIC, in a moment, because that is a critical part of this the agenda in Kenya and policing ethnicity and ethnic relations. But first, let me ask this: it clearly came out as us and them.
Yes.
And in the steps to genocide, that is one of the early stages. What lessons can Kenya learn from our neighbors, Rwanda, and right now even South Sudan? What lessons should we learn?
You see, the issue of genocide, you know, you can trace it back to 1939. That's exactly what Hitler came up, you know, anti-Semitism and xenophobia. And it happened in Rwanda. The three Rwandese were convicted in the ICTR at Arusha for the same utterances, because it was a series of utterances. They lead into the larger picture. It happened in 2005 in Kenya. You see, the referendum was full of hate speech. And of course, at that time we condoned it. We were thinking, yes, it was yes and no and all that. But you see, it went on unchecked. By the time we were reaching the elections 2007, the temper had reached the highest peak. And of course, the consequences were there. What we tried as a nation is to come up with this National Cohesion and Integration Act. setting up the Kibuja Commission. And even the Truth and TGRC Commission. You see, we really did not go deep.
And we need to.
And we need, because you see, healing does not come out of just setting up these cosmetic commissions and giving Kibuja some things, and then when it's really necessary, you do away with it.
Right.
Because we need to go maybe the South African way and seriously think that when you talk about the truth, it must always come out with the intention of giving the exact truth,
yes,
purpose of forgiveness.
Okay, we've got to stop there and go to the next story, but the NCIC, which needs to be really, the appointments have run out and we haven't put anybody in place. What is your recommendation on NCIC?
You see, NCIC, you know, generally you can think in the run-up to the 2013 elections, of course people did want to be checked on utterances and all that, so the commission ran its time and it was not renewed. We need to rethink the commission, and the general wording of the act itself is very lenient. You know, it talks about conciliation, and the tribunal does not have the teeth to really prosecute and all that. We need a serious, even if it be under the tobacco department, really to investigate and prosecute. I think you can say generally that the anti-corruption body is trying as much as it can. You notice very recently we had investigations into the governor of Central Bank. Of course, the court had to give some orders to maintain the status quo. And of course, very other high-profile investigations have been done. What we need more is that the country needs political goodwill to fight these corruption elements, not just in the investigative process, because corruption commences from procurement. When the central government does certain procurement directly, of course other local authorities will try to do the same, and that ignites corruption. So
we have a culture of corruption.
Yeah, because you see, we're fighting. Last week, you see, Parliament, they're trying to debate the Vice President's, Deputy President's procurement of the jet.
Yes.
It was done directly. It was not procured. And in certain quarters, you see, this is trickling down to other persons. You see, we must have accountability from the top. And you show at the bottom that, you see, we are doing it the right way.
Let me ask this. Even now, with the whole discussion around Anglo-leasing, there's still some justification as to why we must still continue payment, for instance, on this. What does it take to put one's foot down and say, and is this just led by you know, is it the President's office that must make a directive? I think Deputy President has said we simply won't pay. But you know, how do we start to change the culture once and for all? Who must drive it?
You see, the Deputy President stated that there is a court order, Parliament may have to come in and stop it. If the court order is from some other country, let's say England, they've been at the forefront helping us fight corruption. And we should be going back and telling them, look, this is part of the issues that you're talking about. So accountability cannot be just in Kenya alone. If the English are coming up with it, we pass the back to them and tell them, look, you're telling us to keep our house in order, and it's coming from you. And you, all these years they have refused to identify who these people are. Yet they can go to court in their country, come with an order in Kenya, say we're going to enforce it. So Parliament should take up and say, look, if it is involving the corruption of Anglo-leasing that has been investigated by parliamentary committees, all sorts of investigation have been done. We are waiting for certain reports to come from the previous corruption commission. We say, look, we cannot pay because we are not going to pay.
There's the big issue right now of the fact that there's corruption at national government, and across the country now we are exporting corruption into our county governments. That, you know, is this something you agree with, and how do you think it can be contained?
You know, at the county government level, it is a question of, do we want to maintain good governance? Well, that's what we at ICJ, for example, stand for. Good governance, democracy. You must start by adhering to the laid down principles. There should be no excuse. And you see, we cannot let the governors go loose and forget that, you see, there is a rule of law. And how do they procure? It must be that. But
who
now
do we look to?
But you see now, when we
is
go
it the
back,
Matemu team? Where does the buck stop on the anti-corruption
the
fight?
Matemu team are doing all they can. You see, we got 47 counties. The Matemu team is looking at the national government. They're investigating them. They're investigating all these bodies, and they need to be given more resources,
capacity.
And you see, when you talk about the county governments, almost 100% of every county has hired its staff based on the tribal basis.
So back to tribe.
It's still there. You can see from every other person who's being engaged in every county.
Right. We'll come back to that issue as we go into national security. And some counties might be saying these are the majority anyway in the area. I'm told we will be winding up. So very quickly, national security. And I want to touch on this particular, Kelvin, because of the challenges with issues of profiling. And a community saying, hold on a minute. We too are Kenyans. We feel victimized in this fight against national security. What's going on? How do we draw a balance?
You see, issues of national security, it's nothing to do with any tribe, religion, or anything like that. You see, we're all affected. And as ICJ, you know, we found it also very difficult because issues of human rights, the rule of law, as against this profiling of ethnic communities and whether it's terrorists or for purposes of national security, there is a very thin line you draw. We have got to know these things from the West. Democracy, whether it is going to talk about bail, the rule of law, we got them from the West. Where is England right now in issue about handling terrorists, or the US? They don't arrest a terrorist today and release him the following day. Because we have to set a balance. So they have strict anti-terrorism laws. Anti-terrorism laws must be put, because you see, you're not dealing with a normal criminal. Let's look at it this way. As Kenyans, this is a culture we have, and you know we cannot assume it. When in your neighborhood you get a petty thief is being caught maybe stealing somebody's small stuff, the populace will rush onto this person with all sorts of weapons, and believe you me, that person will be killed. That's a petty criminal. Anybody with a gun, what happens? Right. He's shot. You are talking about people with bombs. We are not dealing with a petty criminal. And this is the issue we're saying, that we have gone a notch higher. The country needs to move at a speed that the security system requires, because we are lagging behind in terms of the law, and the mechanism has gone further. So we need changes in legislative frameworks. I've got to stop you. As soon as possible, because you see, we are maybe 3-4 years behind. Yes. And these security issues have gone further. Right, and we are core right now as one of the countries in the world affected by terrorism. Thank you so much, and we hope to take these conversations further. Certainly a lot of issues around national security. We're going to take a break now, but we come back with